Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Whatcha Gonna Q. The Oscars are now in our rearview mirror, so we're back to business as usual, as you can see. But I still think that business is exceptional, Alex. What about you?
I agree.
Yeah, the business of recommending some of the best titles that Netflix has to offer, with those recommendations broken down into these three categories. Instant Karma, where we recommend some of the best instant titles to watch before they expire. What the F is This, where we highlight some of the obscure or overlooked titles buried in the annals of Netflix. And For Your Consideration, where the recommended titles tie into a timely, predetermined cinematic theme. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Jim Rohn.
And I'm your other co-host, Alex Rabinowitz.
Yes, and Alex and I vow to you viewers to avoid the Oscar curse. The Oscar curse, of course, being that when an actor or actress wins their coveted statuette, they then go on to make some pretty terrible movies. Yep. But we vow not to give you a terrible show. So, Alex, why don't you start this exceptional show with a recommendation in section 1?
Okay. Henry Selick and Tim Burton are at it again with an adaptation of Roald Dahl's beloved children's book, James and the Giant Peach. Told in vivid stop-motion animation, it features a voice cast that includes Richard Dreyfuss, Susan Sarandon, David Thewlis, and child actor Paul Terry. After James's parents are killed by a rhinoceros, he's forced to live with his horrible aunts on the English seaside. A mysterious old man bestows upon the boy a bag of magic boiled crocodile tongues, which turn his normal garden into the home of a gigantic peach and a collection of overgrown insects living inside.
That's enough chit-chat, I'm freezing!
Jim, I am a sucker for a good animated film. As we've seen on this show countless times, I've recommended many animated films, and some even from the director and producer of this one. And again, Henry Selick delivers a wholly underrated, great film that holds up many years later, thanks a lot to nostalgia and, of course, our ties that we have to films that we might have grown up with.
And like you said, Henry Selick is just known nowadays for just great stop-motion animation films, The Nightmare Before Christmas and Coraline. So it's great to see kind of the first film that he made, kind of the roots where he came from.
Yeah, and he proves that he is a master of this handcrafted stop-motion animation. And for this to be his first big feature is quite an undertaking. It starts in live action, switches to claymation, and then it's got a gigantic peach, big-ass bugs. They're traveling in this beach across the ocean with seagulls tied to a string. It's really huge, but he is able to get it done.
Yeah, based, of course, as you said, on the book by Roald Dahl. And Roald Dahl, for those of you who may not be familiar, is kind of a weird dude. His books, though they were geared towards children, had some inappropriate content. But how, in your opinion, does Henry Selick handle this kind of, transition from this weird source material into a film?
Yeah, it's definitely out there. There's no doubt about it. It's not any weirder than Nightmare Before Christmas, let's say, but it is certainly out there. Roald Dahl does write weird things, and the film includes, like I said, a lot of strange stuff. It might be a little intense for younger kids if you're going to watch this with your family, let's say, but it is a Disney film, and it does have those Disney signatures. It's a musical, there are songs. Check it out. It's a wonderful movie, great animation, and it expires March 21st.
Okay, so you mentioned some scenes a little bit intense for children. Is there stuff in it that will outright scare children?
Yes, young children will be very scared.
Okay, well then it has a lot in common with the film that I'm going to recommend in section 2. Cropsey, written and directed by Joshua Zemet and Barbara Brancaccio, is an American documentary that uses Staten Island's urban legend of the killer Cropsey to explore the communities and circumstances that lead to the creation and proliferation of myths. Akin to the various incarnations of the boogeyman, the filmmakers used the myth of Cropsey to ultimately lead to the film's intended subject, convicted child murderer Andre Rand.
What was that?
I heard something.
Now, Alex, Cropsey, I can understand if you and the viewers have never really heard of it before because it was a documentary that got a very limited release this past summer. But critics loved it. It was critically acclaimed and accepted in a lot of film festivals, included the 2009 Tribeca Film Festival, where it ended up going on to win the Hammer to Nails Grand Jury Prize for Best Documentary Feature.
But what I love about this is that it's combining horror and documentary, which seems right up your alley.
Yeah, and that was really what attracted me to Cropsey, and I think what also will attract viewers who may not necessarily like documentaries into Cropsey as well, because it starts out as this very kind of scary campfire horror story that I think connects with everybody on some level, whether it's childhood memories or whether it's just kind of inherent fears that are in all of us, and then ushers into this this larger story, which is very specific both individually in the idea of it's a killer, a very specific man, Andre Rand, and also communally, and just talking about that idea of communities and the inherent paranoia and kind of gossip, and just the way that these little big towns, in a way, kind of allow these things to spread and morph and just change over time.
Now, people not from Staten Island or from this original generation familiar with the man on which it's based, are they going to be able to relate to the story? What's their entry point into it here?
I think they will be able to relate to Cropsey because Cropsey, like all great films, I think can speak to anyone on one degree or another. Because, you know, every town, every city kind of has those local legends that sort of everybody knows about. But also, it is a generational thing in the sense that the people who have seen Andre Rand go to trial are now grown-up adults and heard about this legend their entire life. So to them, Andre Rand is the fulfillment of a myth. Whereas people who are kids now and teenagers, Andre Rand kind of has created this new myth now that they will kind of spread and they'll kind of talk about. So it's really interesting just to kind of see like how these kind of stories, how these urban legends develop and how they spread and become what they are. I think it's really, really interesting on pretty much all levels.
Well, despite your glowing praise and the Tribeca Grand Jury Prize that it won, that was the only real acclaim that it achieved.
Much like all the titles we're going to talk about in Section 3. So, Alex, you and I both caught the Oscars this past weekend. Did anything stand out to you as a snub or surprise or anything that just caught you off guard?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that The King's Speech beat out True Grit for Best Picture.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I'm still reeling from the fact that The Kids Are Alright didn't win for Best Original Screenplay. But I'm sure we're not the only ones complaining about what films did or didn't win, and also complaining about the long-standing tradition that the Academy has of overlooking some really great titles. Which is why we are dedicating this week's For Your Consideration theme to some great titles that we feel were just unfairly snubbed by the Oscars.
Yay! Directed by Bryan Singer, The Usual Suspects is a twisty mystery crime thriller from 1995 that stars Kevin Spacey, Benicio del Toro, Gabriel Byrne, Stephen Baldwin, and Kevin Pollak. The ballsy script from Christopher McQuarrie tells the story of 5 conmen all feeling the wrath of legendary criminal mastermind Kaiser Sose. The only question, who is Kaiser Sose?
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world.
I know he's here.
He didn't exist.
The Usual Suspects was actually nominated for 2 Oscars. It was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Kevin Spacey and Best Original Screenplay. Of those 2, it won both of them. It is also number 25 on IMDb's Top 250 list. But for some reason at the time, despite all this love, the Academy glanced over it for Best Picture.
Now, we're making history here on What You're Gonna Cue, Alex, because this is now a hat trick of disagreements I have with you. Bryce Dallas Howard, Ron Howard, and now The Usual Suspects. You say it should have been nominated for Best Picture. I actually say that it's actually pretty overrated because The Usual Suspects, in my mind, is a script that exists for its twist ending as opposed to holding up after you already know the twist ending.
You know, it's funny you bring up the ending because I think it's what makes this film and what put it at such a high place on the IMDb Top 250 and why it won Best Original Screenplay and all that is because it became this cultural moment, almost entering the lexicon, and it's up there with such iconic endings as Rosebud and Luke, I Am Your Father. These twists that people don't see coming.
I'm telling you, it's Kaiser Soze!
And that has a lot to do with Bryan Singer and Christopher McQuarrie, who, despite my quarrels with the film, were really young when they made it.
McQuarrie was 26 when he wrote it, and Singer was 29. To make you feel a little bit worse about yourself. Just kidding. And that's a really impressive fact that they were able to create such a twisty, interesting film that got as much attention as it did and continues to do. Unfortunately, recently they haven't done anything of this caliber. McQuarrie did some stuff in TV that wasn't perfect, and Bryan Singer then went on to make some good, some not so good, big budget superhero films. They did collaborate again for Tom Cruise's World War II time period piece, Valkyrie, but it wasn't as great as their original collaboration.
But what is cool is that Bryan Singer used this little independent film to launch himself into much larger projects, a lot like the director of the film I'm going to recommend, Children of Men. In a chaotic near future where mankind is dying out due to planet-wide infertility, former social activist Theo Farron, played by Clive Owen, is charged with transporting a miraculously pregnant youth across country to a group of scientists that may hold the key to salvation. Based on the book by P.D. James, Children of Men was almost universally hailed as an instant classic upon release. Co-written and directed by Alfonso Cuarón, the film was nominated for only 3 Academy Awards, all of which it failed to win.
Now you know what's at stake.
Now, Alex, I actually had the pleasure of reading the script for Children of Men long before the film came out, so I was so anxious to see it come out, and then when I finally walked out of the theater after seeing it for the first time, I knew that I had seen something really special and just really significant.
Yeah, the film's amazing, but I want to know is, how did reading the script affect your viewing experience?
That's a really valid question because obviously I knew how the narrative was going to unfold, I knew where the plot points were going to get hit, I knew how the film was going to end. But what made the film really, truly thrilling was seeing Alfonso Cuarón bring it to life. Alfonso Cuarón is an amazing director, and I think what makes Children of Men really shine and stand out and resonate more than just for the year that it came out was the fact that he was using socio and political problems of nowadays and adapting them to this near future in a believable way, almost like Blade Runner, which was a film that a lot of critics compared Children of Men to.
Yeah, I agree. Which is why it's such a shame that it didn't get any Academy recognition.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know how this works because unfortunately Children of Men was released in the same year as The Departed, so Scorsese was going to win what Scorsese was going to win. But I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that Children of Men was a better film than The Departed, and yet was not nominated for Best Picture. Alfonso Cuarón got no nomination for Best Director, but probably the biggest travesty, I think, was that the cinematography, shot by Emmanuel Lubezki, who actually ended up winning the top prize at the American Society of Cinematographers, which was voted on by his peers, then didn't win an Academy Award, losing out to Guillermo Navarro and Pan's Labyrinth, which is a good film, but didn't have the sheer ambition that Children of Men had. I mean, those long takes and those tracking shots and just that shot on the car, oh my God, it was so beautiful.
Maybe they confused production design for cinematography. I do love Pan's Labyrinth.
Yes, and I do too, but that is a recommendation for another day, because this day is coming to an end. But we want to thank you guys for watching. If you want to reach us, remember, we have plenty of outlets from which you can do so. We have a Facebook page where if you need advice on your queue, take a snapshot and post it on our wall. You can go to our Twitter account if you want to see what we're doing at every minute of every day. Or if you want to keep up to date on what's going on in the world of streaming, Netflix, and just watching movies, be sure to visit our blog at whatchagonnaqueue.com. So until next time, guys, remember, what business is it of yours where I'm from, friendo?